Welcome to Mountain Strong. Today I am at Smith Rock here in the state of Oregon, surprisingly. And so I've had a big week, driven all the way from the state of Alaska down to the state of Oregon as a part of our family's move down to the state of Arizona. And I got a chance to, before I take a flight back to Anchorage, Alaska, to spend another month there before coming back down with my family here to Bend and then continuing our journey down south. Got a chance to come to this state park and to record a couple of psalms here. Struck by the beauty of this place. Didn't know Oregon could look like this, but very happy to have found this place. And I'm not the only one. There's actually a whole bunch, if you can see them on the video, I'm not sure, a whole bunch of people who are here today. A lot of them are scaling the face of that rock wall, and so they probably just appear as little specks in the video, but it's pretty cool to look back and see a lot of people doing what I would never do. I love hiking, but I have no intention of going up one of those sheer cliff faces. I don't know, that might be for you, but not so much for me. Anyway, today we're going to be looking together at Psalm number 127. Let's go ahead and read that now. Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. It is in vain that you rise up early and go late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil, for he gives to his beloved sleep. Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior are the children of one's youth. Blessed is the man who fills his quiver with them. He shall not be put to shame when he speaks with his enemies in the gate. As I begin my comments on this psalm, I want to just go ahead and give a sort of disclaimer to what I'm going to say. I don't want to offend anyone who is single and finds themselves single in their service to the Lord. You know, you can be single and serve the Lord. The Bible actually describes, in fact, singleness as a gift that some can use in their exercise of service to the Lord, and that in some circumstances or situations it is actually not better to be married. 1 Corinthians 7 describes that in great detail, and so obviously that's in the Bible and that's there. So don't get offended when I say that the biblical norm or the typical experience in the life of faith is to have a family, and that for some people the choice not to have a family would actually be a damaging choice for them to make spiritually. There are some people who have the gift of singleness, others who do not have that gift, and others who find themselves, they find themselves in great spiritual difficulty because they don't pursue marriage, or who find themselves in further difficulty later in life because they don't take advantage of the blessing of marriage that's described here. The typical life of faith, the typical norm that you experience, and I know that there's many exceptions, and we live in a society that really likes to uphold those exceptions to the kind of ignoring the rule or the general. The typical experience of the life of faith is to get married and have kids, and it's a blessed experience. We need to say these things in today's culture because as much as we uphold the exceptions and as much as we don't want to offend anybody, we're doing that to the point where we're allowing the voice of society to echo in our ears. And society says that children are not carbon neutral. Society says that children are a negative impact upon the environment, that it's actually more moral not to have children. Society obviously reflects upon the ability that you have without children to travel, to experience the world, to experience life, and upholds that as a greater value than the sacrifices really that you have to make in having children. So we need at times to pause and to reflect upon passages of Scripture like this that tell us very pointedly that children are a blessing. Children are a blessing from the Lord. And children are a blessing from the Lord that, yes, even though they come with sacrifices in the short term, when we reach the older stages of our lives, we are going to face some great difficulties, and children can help us to wage those wars. In a very real way, in the Old Testament world, children were like a defense for the family, and you can see the psalmist using the imagery of children being like arrows in the hands of a mighty man, and therefore being very, able to help defend the family from whatever might oppose it. And so we obviously look at that, and we don't have a need for that same kind of thing in our world today, but it doesn't mean that we're not going to face difficulty later in life or at times in life where children are not going to help us. Even just coming home at the end of a very hard day and seeing smiling faces and seeing those little kids run up to you and hug you and being excited about what they've experienced in their day, and even little things like that can help you to wage the wars that you face in life and overcome them. So I think we need to talk about how good children are, and not, obviously there are people who cannot have children. Obviously there are people who have the gift of singleness. All of that's there, but don't ignore these passages of Scripture that uphold what really is, again, the typical experience of the walk of faith. As the Jews were walking and pilgrimaging to Jerusalem, they were doing so as families. And so this is the eighth of the songs of ascent, and so they're songs that people believe were collected and gathered together for them to sing together as they were walking to Jerusalem during those great feast days. And so what did they want to talk about? Well, they wanted to talk about their families and what a blessing their families were, and they're traveling together with their families, and how exciting and encouraging that is. But at the same time, one of the more powerful things that this psalm has to say, other than the fact that children are a great blessing, is that that blessing will not come and cannot come if God is not considered first. I love the way this psalm is arranged. Rather than talking about the blessing that children are, it talks about what you have to do to make sure your children are a blessing to you. And it talks about the very real fact that children can be anything but a blessing if you do not have the Lord involved in the building of your house. And so rather than go from blessing to warning, it goes from warning to blessing. And it says that as you consider your journey with God, and your journey with God typically therefore involving marriage and having children, he says if you're not going to set out from the very beginning to have the Lord build your house, to have the Lord construct your spiritual city, then it is in vain that you look out for defense. It is in vain that you engage in that building process. Children can be a great blessing, but as the psalm points out, they can also bring great difficulty into our lives. And so the encouragement is, from the very beginning, be very purposeful about what you do. And as I think about my walk with God and I think about raising my family, I'm attempting my best to be very purposeful. I ask questions of myself like, well, what is this behavior, if left unchecked? How is this going to manifest itself later in my child's life? If I allow my children to watch this thing or watch this thing for this length of time, what impact is that going to have upon my child? What are they going to expect later? If I detect ungratitude in my child and I don't check that, what impact is that going to have when my child gets older? And so on. You ask these questions. And then you ask those questions, obviously, of yourself, because you say, I want to be a good example to my children. I want to make sure that I'm doing what I can to build my own spiritual house. As Jesus said, the wise man builds his house upon a rock too. I want to make sure I'm building my spiritual house so that my child knows how to build their house one day. And so again, the blessing that children are and the blessing that a godly house can be is only going to be experienced by those who are being very purposeful in their building project. So when you come to this psalm, don't separate the two thoughts as sometimes people do. I hear verse 1 being applied to anything from business endeavors to church activities and so on. Make those applications, but don't forget that the reason the Jews sang this song was to remind themselves to be purposeful in their parenting. As they were traveling as a family together towards the city of Jerusalem to worship God, they wanted to remember that the Lord needed to be the one who built their house, that they needed to be on the side of God, and that if they didn't, all of their efforts, all that they were trying to do, was going to be vain, empty, and meaningless. So children are a great blessing. I hope that this is encouraging to you in that way. Hope you're not discouraged by what you might be experiencing if you are living in exception. Again, singleness can be a gift, 1 Corinthians 7. Use that gift for the Lord, obviously. Being parents who cannot have children, even that can be a situation that can bring good, where adoption can be a part of your future, or if adoption cannot be for some reason, where you can be as surrogate parents to those who are a part of your congregation to look out for those children. Children in your life are always going to bring blessings no matter of what variety. I remember when Jesus, he was walking with the disciples, and when he needed to teach them a powerful lesson, he brought a child and he sat that child in their midst. And so children are a blessing. But again, it's a qualified blessing as far as this psalm is concerned, that we want to make sure that the Lord is the one who is constructing our house, and that we are building it, therefore, with him as our guide, as our guard, as our help. May God bless you today.